Hello, lovelies, and welcome to Tales with Tasha. To celebrate my 100th week on YouTube, I have a longer story for you today. It's full of witches and magic and werewolves and mayhem. I really hope you enjoy it. Thank you for dropping by. Just a heads up, this story has been edited for YouTube. If you would like to see the original version, stick with me to the end and I'll tell you how you can download your own copy. Survival of the fittest, werewolves and witches and more. Lil looked down at the nude body and knew conflict had come to her town. Just like the dark waters lapping at the corpse's legs, the local veneer of civilization hid far too many dangerous things. Sheriff, that's Dan Winters. Yes, Roper, I have eyes, she said, turning away from the scene. He, look at his chest. Roper didn't really have the temperament for sheriff's deputy, but she knew the boy's father, and Tom had asked her nicely. The town was very much built on families, so Lil hadn't had the heart to say no. Still, it might have helped to have someone more capable for this. She sent Stagg and Smithy, both far more experienced, to check on a case of cow tipping. Most bodies in the water usually turned out to be the merfolk or floating logs. She hadn't expected it to be an actual deceased man. Roper, she said, pulling the chain from her pocket. Mark, look at me and take a deep breath. Of course, the kid's stare swung round to her immediately. He was well conditioned to obey her voice. She held up the crystal on its chain and let it swing in the early morning light. Winter's passed from drowning, Mark, she said, slowly and clearly as the crystal glinted. He must have gotten smashed and fallen off the jetty. Smashed, yes, Roper responded, as his eyes went glassy and his expression relaxed. We'll put him in a body bag and deliver him to Doc Langdon, Lil instructed. Yes, Sheriff, Roper replied and smiled at her, before turning back to the body. Lil didn't like ensorceling her people as a rule, but every now and then it was necessary. She laid the groundwork with every one of them as soon as they started working for her, just in case. It was better that the purely human part of town remained unaware that some of their fellow townsfolk were not quite normal. As chief witch, it was her place to keep the balance. It didn't take long to get Winters safely stowed in the back of her truck, at which point she and Roper climbed into the front and she turned the ignition. The engine gave a cough or two, but eventually started. Her truck was getting old. Bit like her. Dr. Bartholomew Langdon was the only doctor in town, and hence the coroner as well, so they went straight to his offices. What you got for me today, Lil? Bart asked after they deposited the body bag on his slab. Dan Winters, she replied. Looks like drowning. Bart opened the body bag and his eyes flashed bright green in shock. Bart also happened to be a vampire. I see what you mean, he said. Thanks, Roper, Lil said as Bart stared significantly at the door. Can you head back to the station? Start the paperwork on this, and I'll see you there after I've spoken with Carrie. Right you are, Sheriff, Roper replied, with far too much enthusiasm. Lil wondered if she had ever been that young. Someone was serious, Bart said as soon as the door closed. Someone wants conflict, Lil replied. Wasn't you, was it, Bart? That earned her a double eyebrow raise. As if I'd be that stupid, Bart replied. Werewolves are fine for a little snack, but I haven't slain one in centuries. Whoever did it removed the heart and laced the body with silver. They definitely didn't want him coming back. The thing was, supernatural beings ended each other all the time. Violence was part of their way of life. However, being supernatural, they rarely stayed dead. It took time and effort, but most of the species in town could regenerate given the right circumstances. For a werewolf, completely destroying the heart, or in this case, removing it from the body, and silver were the ultimate weapons. Either would have been fatal on their own, as long as there was enough silver to saturate the bloodstream. Using both was someone making doubly sure. "Any clues as to who did it?" Lil asked, but it was a faint hope. "I wish I could say yes, but this was done with a knife, not claws," Bart replied. "However, given that the wolves are in a land dispute with the dryads at the moment, and Dan called Mallow a moss-brained cow, I'd start there." "First, I have to break the news to Carrie," Lil said. "God damn it, this is the second time she's a widow." Lil was not looking forward to it. "I know that look," Carrie Winters said when Lil stepped into her kitchen. "What has my reprobate husband done this time?" "He died." "Shit, again? When can we pick him up? It'll take a month to regenerate him this time. The goddess was so pissed after the last 3 times. "No, Carrie," Lil said, reaching out and placing a hand on the woman's arm. "I'm so sorry. He's really gone." Carrie tilted her head, and Lil was reminded of the wolf that lived inside the woman. "I don't understand." "Someone took out his heart and laced his body with silver," Lil said. "We found him on the shore this morning." When Carrie snarled, eyes going pale wolf blue and long canines erupting from her jaw, Lil expected it. "I'll kill her," Carrie said, charging for the door. "Wait," Lil said, and put just a bit of power behind her words. Witchery didn't work as well on supernaturals as it did on humans, but at least it made Carrie pause. "Don't use your tricks on me," Carrie bit out. "You don't know Mallow or any of her people did this," Lil said, facing down the pissed-off werewolf. "This could be someone who knows of your dispute, who wants your groups weakened by conflict. This could be meddling humans. It could be anyone. You've heard something. Are we being hunted?" Lil shook her head quickly. The last thing she needed was anyone going after the rest of town. "No, I don't know anything yet. I came straight here. You don't know anything either." "Human law has no place in this," Carrie said, voice reverberating with power. "Get out of my way, Sheriff." Supernaturals didn't always think with their heads. "I called conclave," Lil said before Carrie could get past her. "You what? You can't. As chief witch, it is my right. Give me time to investigate, and I will bring all my findings to the conclave." "You're stepping where you don't belong," Carrie warned. "You all made me sheriff for a reason, Carrie," Lil decided to try a little logic. "What if this is a trick? Do you want your pack vulnerable when the real danger comes? Do you want this town to turn into a battleground? I can only hide so much from the humans. 3 days, that's all I ask." "1," Carrie countered. "The pack won't stand for longer." "You're alpha female," Lil started to say. "And Dan was alpha male," Carrie replied. "The pack will demand vengeance. The conclave must be tonight." Lil didn't like it, but she knew it was the best she was going to get. "Tonight then," she agreed. "And Carrie, I really am sorry. He was a pain in my ass, but Dan didn't deserve that." Carrie nodded, agreeing the sentiment as Lil turned to leave. "Mallow!" Lil stood among the trees and called. Dryads were very hard to find if they didn't want to be. She could track them down if she had to, but asking was easier. The forest was home to more than one set of supernatural creatures, but the grove she was standing in was sacred to the Dryads. It was where they gathered for all important occasions. Lil figured this was important. It was usually a peaceful place, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. Lil waited for several minutes. "Sheriff." She almost jumped out of her skin as Mallow spoke into her ear. It was going to be one of those meetings then. Turning, she glared at the Dryad matriarch. "Do you have to do that?" she demanded. Mallow smiled, as if it was a joke, but the smile did not reach the woman's eyes. Dryads came in all shapes and sizes, just like their trees, and Mallow was tall and willowy. Lil was not a short woman, but Mallow had a few inches on her, and the dryad was clearly trying to use it to intimidate her. "You have found our justice, then," Mallow said. Lil's heart fell. She had been hoping so hard that Winter's passing had not been the work of the dryads. "Why, Mally?" she asked. "Why did you do it?" The dryads were usually of the more level-headed of the local residents. "He dared lay hands on my daughter," Mallow said, green veins lifting in her skin at her righteous anger. "Peony, is she—" Lil trailed off as Mallow shook her head. "Lily? He hurt Lily?" All dryads were named for flowers, but Lily had been given a name so close to Lil's in her honour. She was the girl's godmother, or at least the dryad equivalent. "She has barely 16 years, Mallow said, voice low and distressed. "What he tried to do to her." Lil was beginning to understand. "Is she—" "Bruised and shaken, but otherwise untouched," Mallow told her. "The animal had been smoking cigarettes laced with monkshood." Lil swore. Monkshood, also known as wolfsbane, was poisonous to werewolves, like most narcotics were to humans, and had similar effects. It was also highly addictive. Lil knew Dan had had a habit as a teenager, but she was sure he'd been clean ever since. Werewolves did not take kindly to weakness in their alphas. "We will deal with his litter if they dare come to our woods," Mallow said. "No, you won't," Lil said, and made sure her tone could not be misunderstood. "I called a conclave tonight. There we will get this all out in the open." "We had cause." "Yes," Lil agreed. There was nothing more precious to a dryad than a child, because they had so few. Mallow was extraordinary in that she had 2 daughters, which was why she was the matriarch of the group. Dryads always bred female, and very few human men were compatible breeding partners. Once upon a time, when they found one, they had tended to kidnap and keep him. In modern times it was more a matter of quick seductions. Dryads didn't really see the point in men other than as DNA donors. "Tonight," Lil said. "We can prove it tonight." The humans in town knew it as the Old Mason Barn. The supernaturals called it the place of meeting. It was as old as the town and big enough to house all the supernatural races. Word had been sent round, and there were 1 or 2 from every local race present as witnesses. The only larger groups allowed that evening being the dryads and the wolves. The first thing Lil noticed when the wolves arrived was Carrie was not among them. In fact, the group was all men. Reese Poulin seemed to be in charge. "Where is your alpha?" Lil asked. "Morning," Poulin said in a dismissive tone. "I am alpha-elect." Lil could not believe that Carrie would not be at the conclave, but she had no say in internal politics. She would have to deal with that later. Poulin had been trouble since he had rolled into town 3 years previously. Having him as alpha would be bad news. "You insult us," Mallow said from her side of the room. "You are not alpha. Your alpha should be here." "This is man's work," Poulin said and smiled nastily. Not that a dick would understand. Lil ticked off sexist and homophobic in her head. Not a surprise when it came to Poulin, only he hadn't had the guts to say it out loud before now. "Keep a civilized tongue in your head," Lil warned. Poulin sneered at her. "We are gathered here to hear the case against Dan Winters," Lil started to say. "He was murdered," came from Poulin. "We had cause," was the immediate response. "Quiet!" Lil put magic into the command. Both sides looked affronted, but did not keep arguing. "Dan Winters is accused of attacking Lily, daughter of Mallow, and attempting to assault her," Lil continued. If this is proven, his fate is just. Do any challenge this concordance? What's wrong with a little fun? One of Poulin's lackeys growled out. Fun? Mallow's voice was outraged, and Lil didn't blame her. She would have said something, but someone touched her on the arm. She turned to find Bart standing behind her. His face was grim. As the argument on the floor continued, he leant in. I found something else in Dan Winter's blood, he whispered. Hemlock. Ice ran up Lil's spine. Hemlock had only one use with supernaturals of all kinds. It made them susceptible to another's influence. Possession of hemlock was a crime punishable by death in the laws of every race present. Lil had had enough. From her position on the sidelines, she stepped into the centre of the room. Get out of the way, witch, Poulin demanded. We will settle this the old way. No one will be settling anything, she said. Someone has been interfering in my town, and I will have it no longer. It was all beginning to look too convenient, too arranged, and the presence of hemlock had only one explanation. Someone had wanted Dan out of the way, and they had arranged to make sure the dryads did it. Everyone knew there was no higher crime to a dryad than attacking one of their daughters. I'm fed up of you, Poulin snarled. We should have got rid of the humans years ago. Survival of the fittest is the only way. He came at her then, and Lil's patience snapped. The werewolf's hand stopped in mid-air as he tried to grab her. He froze with a comically startled expression on his face. Survival of the fittest, Lil said and laughed. You have no idea. I created this town as a haven, and a haven it will remain. Everyone was staring at her now. After all, she should have not had that kind of power. What are you? Mallow asked. Not what, dear lady, Bart said from his position at the edge of the gathering. After all, he was the only person in town who actually knew. Who? Lil let her human disguise fall away. Age dropped away, human frailty vanished. By the ancient mothers, Mallow whispered. Almost, Lil said. I am Lilith, mother of all monsters. I am the root from which you all spring, and I will have order. Two of the werewolves fell to their knees. After all, she was their goddess. Some of the other races were whispering prayers. Someone gave Dan Winters hemlock, she said, now that she had everyone's attention. His passing was arranged. That sent more whispers around the room. I suspect if I were to check Carrie's blood, I would find hemlock there too, wouldn't I, Poulin? She said, and released the wolf just enough for him to look terrified. You were behind the land dispute. Did you think I didn't know? But hemlock, Poulin, that was stupid. Lifting her hand, she made a sign in the air, and a small packet leapt out of Poulin's jacket straight to her palm. We did not know, Mallow said. That's why conclave is better than revenge, Mallow, Lil said. Now I must see justice done. She dropped Poulin from her magical grasp, and his own wolves grabbed him. They knew a lost cause when they saw one. Ignoring them, Lil lifted both her arms above her head and demanded power from the earth. Dan Winters, come to me, she called, voice reverberating with magic. The ground shook. Someone screamed, and a glowing form appeared in front of her. Why have you called me, mother? Winter's shade asked in the haunting tones of the deceased. Would you live again? She asked. The shade frowned. How? He asked. Justice was all she said. Then yes. Eons of time had come and gone since Lilith had come into being, and she called on it all at those words. She placed one hand on the shade's chest and pointed the other at Rhys Poulin. With all her might she pulled. Paulin screamed, not unsurprising given she was tearing his soul from his body. There were laws. Once a body was truly deceased, nothing could bring it back. But a life could be given for a life. As she pulled Paulin out, she pushed Winters in, until it was not Winters standing in front of her, it was Paulin. Paulin's body stared at her, amazed and confused. "You are condemned," she said to the shade in front of her, and banished it with a flick of her hand. She looked around at all in the conclave. "Remember," she said, "justice was done." Pulling her human disguise back on was easy after so many centuries, and the room froze as time stopped. What just happened?" Mallow asked, blinking back to life. "I think I was possessed," Lil said, as if she too was waking up. "Did that just happen?" Paulin's body put his head back and howled, even as he began to flow from man to wolf, shedding clothes as he went. Then, almost as quickly, Wolf became naked man. A very shocked-looking Dan Winters was sitting on the barn floor. "That just happened," Mallow said, even though she didn't sound as if she quite believed it. "How the hell am I supposed to explain resurrection to the humans?" Lil complained. Thank you for sticking with me to the end, lovelies. And now, if you would like your own copy of this book for free, scan the QR code on screen now, or click the link in the description, and then use the code on screen to download your own copy for free. Please do subscribe and like. And why not watch another of my longer stories in the video on screen now?